Welcome back to Interjections Napoli Scudetto Champion Edition. I'm your host, Andrew. Mikko, Jay, and Irfan with me. Inter, of course, do not win the Scudetto. Napoli get the job done. This was always the expected result, but it doesn't mean it didn't hurt. Mikko, how are you coping with the grief?
I guess it's exactly that, coping. I felt I don't know. Maybe I did my morning after Lazio match already, so it didn't felt maybe as bad as some other people felt. That's the initial reaction what I had. So yeah, of course, super disappointed, but I think it was a long shot to be able to kind of win it in the last round.
Jay, how are you doing?
I'm good. I congratulate the fine, unwashed people of the city of Napoli for their fourth Scudetto. It was a mediocre battle for the ages. Now, but all joking aside, all saltiness aside, I think the deserved winners ultimately won out in the Scudetto race. So, congratulations to Napoli. Big fuck you to Inter. That's about as much as they deserve. Let's get into it.
Irfan, it's just an honor to have you making a guest appearance on this podcast that you so frequently skip.
I knew that was coming. Despite all the rumors of me silent quitting or whatever, I trust the fans know that I am alive and well. Just been traveling a lot for work and stuff. But no, it's great to be back, and wish it was in better circumstances. Wish the Scudetto miracle would have worked out for us, but. Props to Napoli for winning. Agree with Jay. It's pretty much the most mediocre battle of the ages you can imagine. But the reality is that they led the league for many, many weeks, way more than Inter ever did this season. And the only reason that Inter's hopes were the hopes of Inter fans was so high was because Napoli almost fumbled it right at the end. So keeping that context in mind, definitely still disappointed that we lost, but it was kind of a fool's hope to begin with, especially after that string of results we had when we were focusing on the Champions League. So despite losing the Scudetto officially the last couple of days, this was the Scudetto that was lost essentially last summer when we had little to no investment in the club. So it is what it is, but happy to discuss it with you guys, and let's get into it.
Yeah, and it was a Scudetto that was lost last summer for multiple reasons, not only because of the horrible Mercato, but think back to just the slow start this team had to the season, where we had disappointing results against Genoa and the worst team in the league, Monza, to start the year, and it was just, there was so much working against us that we never recovered from a fitness perspective, from a injury perspective. I know you all remember Lautaro rushing back from Copa America duty because we had injuries at striker, and we just never properly got on our feet this season. And even when the window opened and we thought we might finally jump through it, seize advantage of the opportunity, we didn't, because we just kept stumbling over our own 2 feet. And we don't need to eulogize this campaign too much, because I think Mikko nailed it when he said that, hey, like last week against Lazio, that draw was the true end of the Scudetto campaign. No one went into this weekend expecting us to get the job done. No one thought we had any hope. I watched this match with one of the Inter clubs, the Inter club in New York, and it was just a very subdued room. Even when we went up early via the De Vrij header, no one was overly excited. Everyone knew what this likely meant, and it didn't take long for McTominay to put together just a beautiful bicycle kick to win Napoli their Scudetto. And while they had an underwhelming campaign, you got to give McTominay credit. He's won the league MVP for the season, and he deserves it in a league campaign where there were very, very few standout players. I don't know what Inzaghi's path forward at this club is going to look like. There's all these rumors, and I don't know how serious they are about him being linked to Saudi Arabia for large sums of money. Of course, we have an aging squad, but I'll just say that it's impossible to evaluate this league campaign without evaluating the Champions League campaign. And it's as simple as, if we go out there and we beat PSG this week, no one is going to care about this, or no one's going to care nearly as much about this. But if we lose to PSG, then you start evaluating everything in totality, and you start making the memes about Inzaghi holding up 3 fingers and coming up over 3. So at the end of the day, this hurts, but we won't really know how much this hurts until the PSG result happens next week. Mikko, anything you want to add about the roller coaster of a season that we just never quite took advantage of?
Yeah, maybe quickly we do the proper review later in the summer. But I'm wanted to check the results when you started talking about the lost points early in the season. Realized that we managed to get like at most 4-game winning streak in the Serie A. So I guess that kind of explains everything, how much we, or how less we were able to be kind of consistent with the results. There were always something coming up when we were about to get like and actually that was one 4-game winning streak only. So then it was just three or even less. So I guess you guys kind of explained why this happened, and yeah, it was tough going to this Como match to hope for a miracle like Irfan referred, since it just wasn't going to happen. I was watching both Como match and the Napoli Cagliari match, and it was like literally from the first minute Napoli was piling like huge pressure on Cagliari's goal, and at no point in the game it looked like something other could have happened than Napoli scoring at least one goal. And yeah, I kind of put it, shut that game off when Lukaku scored. Actually, I didn't even saw that goal, so I only watched it till McTominay scored, and then I was like, fuck it, it's over. So yeah, quite disappointing. But as you said, nothing is kind of, we can't make evaluations yet. Only like next week from now, or a week from now, we can do like proper evaluation. What was the kind of the end result of the season?
We've talked about this in past episodes, but the comparisons between this league campaign and the Radu league campaign, where we lost the Scudetto to Milan, are so similar. They both come down to the last day of the season where we've blown control of our own destiny and we're stuck waiting around hoping one of these, I want to say relegation sides, or sides worthy of relegation anyway, is stuck basically doing nothing. I think Sassuolo conceded like 4 goals to Milan. Cagliari didn't even get a shot on goal against Napoli. So with the comparison,
0.04 XG is what they finished with.
Great. So with the comparisons being obvious, Jay, I have to ask you, which one hurt more?
It's a funny question. Irfan was asking this question through the week about which was the more impactful, or irritating, or upsetting loss. It's hard to say. I think they both have reasons that you could say one over the other. For example, the way in which we lost the first Scudetto with the Rado calamity, and after losing the derby to Milan, indicates that Scudetto was probably lost under more contentious circumstances and probably more upsetting to a lot of Inter fans. I think this time around, just the sheer apathy and lethargy of the entire season probably mitigated some of the emotion. At the same time, I feel like we could have been and should have been wiser and smarter about it, but instead we kind of didn't learn from our lessons. We still had even these really pathetic games, despite the what should have been like a wellspring of energy following the Champions League victories. I kept saying this, but winning the biggest, arguably the greatest Champions League semi-final tie of all time wasn't enough energy for these guys to go out and win 2 games, you know what I mean? Like, that didn't give them the motivation, the energy to just keep their heads straight, and you still had Barella throwing his arms around like a fuckhead and complaining and crying to the ref, and, strikers playing pedestrian football, and Thuram more interested in backflicks and actually taking a shot in 4 games, Like, the entire energy was off from pretty much the beginning of the season. As you said, the season started the way it ended with the young prospect Bisek basically throwing away the result with some idiotic penalty in the dying stages of the game. But more to the point, like I said, I would have expected a bit more from the guys following the victory last season. We were the defending champions, defending our Serie title, and there seemed to be a shocking lack of desire to really keep hold of that belt, and defend our own throne. So I think that is one reason why you might say this season was more disappointing, but I'll probably say the first, or the former of the two choices was more annoying, also because Milan won, whereas obviously Napoli, look, I'm not an Italian, I don't really care about the whole, what do they call the Neapolitans, the Teroni or something, like the impoverished southerners and all that kind of stuff. I don't care about that. I don't feel these local rivalries the same that Italians do, obviously. So it's always nice to see, I guess, an underdog win it, and unless that underdog is Arsenal, and you see all the fireworks going off all under the Vesuvius basin. That's always cool to see. So, realistically, a fourth Scudetto for Napoli is going to mean more than another Scudetto won with what was arguably a really uninspiring Scudetto race for us. So, yeah, fair game. I think ultimately Napoli's or Conte's job to win the title I think Napoli finished 10th last season or something like that. So I don't underestimate the difficulty of the job he had. At the same time, I don't think it was as difficult as the job that Inzaghi had, which was obviously to try and win basically 3 titles, apparently, with the squad that he has. So, look, Conte's job was arguably smaller, but he did it. Inzaghi has not yet done his job, and as you said, it remains to be seen whether he will successfully complete the largest portion of his job.
Irfan, I'm assigning you the responsibility to partition blame for this league campaign between 4 parties, between management, Inzaghi, the contributing players to this team, and Aslani. Who would you blame, what percentage, for this lack of a Scudetto?
Well, I'm glad this question came to me, since I'm one of the few people in the Inter world who can probably answer it objectively, given the 4th choice you gave, which was Aslani. I'll start off just by saying that what you guys all said was, undeniably true. I mean, it's disappointing, but it's almost, kind of a TBD until we play that match next week. You got to hand it to Conte. I mean, he's a one-trick pony, but he does his trick really well. I mean, he's the guy to bring in, like kind of like how Ranieri used to be, or probably still is the guy to bring in when you need to like kind of right ship a team and maybe prevent them from getting relegated. Conte is the kind of guy who you bring in when you have some talent in the squad, but you're committed to playing once a week to grind out results and give yourself a good chance at a Scudetto. And he did it with Napoli. I give Napoli credit, obviously, and I give Conte credit, obviously. But this is not a Napoli team that is by any stretch better than the Inter team. Inter is a far superior team. It was just circumstances that kind of prevented us from winning what we needed to win down the stretch. If you think about, if you were to pan out the entire Scudetto season and the entire league season, all of the matches, if you were to pan out and pretend that all of the weeks were basically just one Serie A match, in a lot of ways, the season played out exactly like one of our many infamous matches, right? Where we have a great stretch, we're doing really well, after kind of fumbling the beginning. And then, lo and behold, our Dumfries or whatever ends up scoring late, but we end up conceding and throwing whatever our chances were to win, and we end up with like some sort of a draw or a loss. So in a lot of ways, the season played out exactly like too many of our games played out, which is ultimately really disappointing. But when you think about why that happened, and we've talked about this before, it's the some of it is mentality, sure, but I've always been one of those people who kind of downplays that aspect of it. I think it ultimately comes down to circumstances. It comes down to the squad. It comes down to the squad age. And some of it, yes, comes down to Inzaghi and his management down the stretch. So when you're assigning blame for what happened in this season, it's really hard not to start with, the ownership and the management and kind of what they went into this season with. This was essentially year zero for Oak Tree. They had minimum investment in the squad. They took a lot of kind of long shots with players and with retaining players who are a year older and probably a year or two removed from being real effective players. And then they made some head scratching investments in the squad that were probably not the best uses of money. I mean, how many times did people like Palacios or even Martinez really play in their roles? And so spending money the way they did and, the lack of investment in the summer, I think really set us up for failure. So I would give them probably like a solid 60% of the blame. I think you have to give the ultimate players at least some responsibility. I would probably give them close to another 20% blame, because ultimately the season came down to the inability, despite many chances, of our forwards being able to do anything worthwhile on the pitch to help us win. And you can't survive when 3 of your 5 forwards, so Correa, Arnautovic, and Taremi, score like, I don't know, like 4 league goals, something like that, 3. I mean, it's completely mind-boggling how ineffective they were throughout the season. And it's no surprise that we ended up dropping most of our points when we were struggling with injuries to Thuram and when we were struggling with injuries to Lautaro. And Lautaro himself, didn't have a particularly great season for us in the league. So we also can't forget that. So it's really hard not to hold the players somewhat responsible as well. So I'll give him another 20% there. Inzaghi, I think, does deserve, easily 10% of the blame because, like we talked about, a lot of his game management, a lot of his subs didn't make sense in a lot of places. It took him, 30 weeks to realize that anytime you sub off Bastoni late in the game, we're pretty much going to concede. So the fact that it took him so long to kind of realize that, and again, part of it is his circumstances and the way the team was set up. There's not so much that he can do, but the manager always deserves blame. And you can't ignore the fact that, in his few seasons with us, he's basically lost the Scudetto in close races twice. In both cases, arguably with a better squad. Now, again, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances, a lot of, reasons why that happened. I still think, by and large, he's one of the best managers we've ever had, and he should stay. And all of this talk about him going to Saudi is, I think, BS. I don't think any of that's true. But you have to assign some blame to him, too. Ultimately, he is responsible as a manager. So then that leaves, I guess, the last 10%, which I guess you have to give to Asllani. But realistically, guys, I mean, it was the forward play and the injuries that cost us this season way more than some underwhelming performances by Asllani. But I will take this time to say that Asllani kind of embodies a little bit of, what we lacked this season, which was just impactful substitutions, impactful play off the bench. It's not good enough to have players who can maybe perform at like a 70, 80% level of what your starter performs at. That's kind of almost expected, right? But you have to be able to have players off the bench who can make a difference. Like, where's the player off the bench who will come in and shut down a match to hold a lead for us? when we have a lead late? No one really. Fratesi, in a few spots, was the player who came in and gave us a lead or gave us the draw when we needed a goal. We couldn't even rely on our forwards to really do that. So this team really lacked meaningful contributions off the bench. And of course, you have to put Asllani as part of that as well. But he's by no means near even probably the top 5 players on this squad who I think were the most disappointing and led to us losing the most points in the league.
People love to talk about the attack, and I do too, because let's be honest, we have 3 non-entities at reserve striker, and it's a failing of management, and it's a failing of Oak Tree to not properly reinforce the squad. But what about the defense? I mean, this team conceded like 13 more league goals this year than they did last year. And it just felt throughout the season there was a lack of concentration. And when we talk about this team's struggles this season, so many of these collapses were conceding goals late and putting yourself in inopportune positions. Like, just think about last week at Lazio. The problem wasn't scoring. We got the job done. We scored the 2 goals we needed. We even responded when they tied it up. But the problem was conceding late. And we've been conceding late goals all season. And last year, there was this intensity in the way this team played. We never conceded goals late in matches. We had this warrior mentality. And as a result, we always got the job done. That's why it was such a dominant league campaign. Whereas it's the complete opposite this season, where whenever you get late in a match, you fully expect to lose it or drop points because the team just wasn't turned on, wasn't focused. Even in the Champions League, like we've said, it was conceding goals late, conceding goals at inopportune times. So I get it with the attack, because the attack has just horrible players in it. But considering who our starters are defensively, and the fact that we pretty much are well reinforced at every position, we have a good alternative at every center back position. I mean, conceding an extra 13 goals in the league it's a huge problem. And Napoli finished top of the league in defensive stats, goals conceded, all that, and it's not a coincidence they won the Scudetto.
Yeah, I would say that it's not just like the defenders as like players, but the kind of the defending of the whole team. I think that was a bit of a maybe midfield didn't support the defending well enough, and this general lack of focus at given times maybe resulted in the conceding these goals all over the place. I want to quickly get back on what was asked by Irfan about the kind of who's to blame. I think we've discussed this before. Like, is it the lack of depth, or is it this kind of a lack of focus? Are the players to blame, and so on, or the coach? I've actually changed my opinion a bit about this. I feel that it is a bit more about the players than maybe, like, the depth is an issue for sure. But I think, like, looking these later, like the end of the season matches, like it wasn't there that this, like you mentioned, this warrior mentality. Like we kept conceding kind of stupid goals way too much. And I don't think you can blame the depth too much. Of course, it would help if you didn't need to play that much, but still, like we've conceded a lot of goals which kind of looked really stupid to concede, and simply because players are not, or it felt that they are not like super in the job, like they are not like super focused, and they kind of how do you say it? They just maybe it was a bit of about tiredness. If you are tired, you maybe you try to cheat a bit about some uncomfortable things you need to do, and then it ends up being your team conceding goals. But still, I feel that there was something lacking, and maybe it's always hard to kind of pinpoint one one responsible, of course, but I think that there was this lack of, maybe there was this kind of complacency what we've talked about before. Like maybe that played part in this campaign. I think that I think it was pretty obvious we didn't play nearly as like focused this season than last season, and we dropped like, was it like 10 points less than last season. So there's the kind of result, and what can you say? I feel you mentioned, Andrew, about the defenders. Like we had pretty okay depth there. We actually lacked one player completely because we didn't have a proper. Okay, we have Augusto for Bastoni, but then Augusto was for DiMarco as well. So that was kind of a double role for Augusto. So we kind of lacked that one. I don't know about the Palacios thing. Was he never even intended to be kind of part of the squad? He came like right after right before the deadline, transfer window deadline ended in August. So I don't know what was the kind of the idea. Was it for the future? But then he left for Monza, and we kind of left without a player. Or was it for like a stopgap for Buchanan? And then Buchanan was a non-existent for the whole season. Then he left, and Zalewski came in. But it was a bit of shuffling there. But I felt that we still lacked like a center back there. I think Augusto is, maybe he's still a wing back, even if he does a pretty good job there in the defense as well.
Look, I know we disagree a little bit on this point between us four, but I don't think that it can be explained by mentality or complacency alone, the way we've conceded goals late. I don't believe that.
Not alone, but I think
or
it
even
plays
a
part.
big part of it, even a big part, Mikko, because I think the problem is, again, like you had this mentality last season. You didn't have complacency last season. I mean, we were much more organized and able to see out the results last season than we were this season. So what's really different? And I think what's different is that, most of our players are a year older. So fatigue late in the game is a huge factor when you have all these people who are, on the wrong side of 30 and some on the wrong side of 35. And then just so many matches, right? Like 2 times a week consistently, because we went deeper in the Champions League than we did last season. That definitely plays a factor down the stretch. And then I think the other thing that we can't really forget is that we didn't have too many injuries, and a lot of clubs had injuries, including Napoli. But we had a lot of injuries in very strategic areas that really cost us heavily. And that is where a lot of the depth issues came in, right? Like, I'm not talking about some of the points we dropped when we had leads late. Like, fine, we dropped points there. But there's a lot of other matches where we just couldn't get off the ground at all. We couldn't score because Thuram carried us on the offensive line for the first, like, almost half of the season. Then Lautaro finally hit his stretch, but he was sort of up and down and injured and out. Remember, he had so many weeks where, like, he couldn't buy a goal either. And then we already talked about the 3 other forwards. And then we also had a massive injury to Acerbi for a large part of the season. And then Augusto was injured, DiMarco was injured, Dumfries was injured, and then Zielinski, who was supposed to be one of the main players that we added to really help sort of the spine of the midfield and to, help us out late in matches if he subbed in to kind of fortify the midfield and prevent us from getting overrun. And then developing, Aslani in that role also. Like, the midfield, I think, was a huge, huge disappointment to me as well. So, the injuries to Zielinski, I think, cost us a lot, including costing us basically down the stretch of this season as well. So it's really, I think, a lot has to go right if you're going to try to battle on 3 fronts. And when you have like a relatively aging squad and injuries to key positions during key stretches of the season, then even if you do have, competent depth in the team, when each person's stepping up into a role as a starter, you start to lack. And so I attribute, I would say, the overwhelming majority of our late game collapses to just lack of player depth and fatigue. And before I would even go to mentality, I would go to Inzaghi's tactics. I think a lot of times he played matches really scared down the stretch, and I think he retracted the team way too much. And as much as everyone loved to give us a lot of credit for the way we would clamp down in the Champions League, we didn't see that a lot in the league. Like whenever we went to a low block in the league, a lot of times it didn't work out that well. And so that's another thing I think that's hard to really kind of overlook, which is that Inzaghi's tactics just became too conservative and too scared down the stretch. And I think that's one of the main criticisms I have of him, and something that he definitely needs to address. So, of course, mentality, complacency is part of it. But honestly, for me, that's third on the list of the things that I would blame.
I will just add quickly regarding the strikers, like he's getting some flowers from some corners, but this was a shit season for Lautaro, Champions League aside. In the league, he was unreliable as all hell, and he had yet another characteristic Lautaro drought where he went weeks and weeks and weeks without scoring, looking just dismal. And it was lucky that Thuram had such a impactful start of the season. But even Thuram, in his last 20 games, has scored 2 goals. I'm talking about the league games only. 2 goals in the last 20 games, and throw in like 5 games missed out of injury. The tail, not even the tail end, like the second half, the second 50% of the season has not been good from him from a league perspective either. And so you've got 2 starting players who never really got going together at any point. I can't think of very many games where both of them scored, or very many games where both of them were looking good. It was always like Thuram's, leading the charge now and carrying the weight of the attack, while Lautaro's having his typical shit spell. And that was followed by Thuram's cooled down significantly, but thankfully Lautaro seems to be, a little bit back to normal. There's never a point where these guys are both fully firing, which is, a big concern for the Champions League final, which we'll get into. But we never had reliable forwards at any stretch in the season. We've got 2 forwards starting the game, obviously, in our formation, and you want to have at least one coming off the bench that you can trust. At any point in the season, we only ever had one functional forward. Thuram, like I said, Thuram and Lautaro taking turns at rotating, being shit. And the other 3 were just all-around shit all season long. So that's something I'll add about the forwards, but yeah.
Well, let's get into the PSG match. Well, like Mikko said, once the season officially wrapped, we'll do our same thing we did last year, our position by position breakdowns of what went well, what went wrong across the campaign. But season's not over yet. The big one awaits, and it's just crazy to think that we're even in the Champions League final. Just to do it in such an impressive fashion, to like beat the Spanish champions, the German champions, and no one thought we were going to be here. I know I was on this podcast saying, why are we wasting our time prioritizing the Champions League? It's not a realistic goal, but here we are. I mean, in the final, all comes down to next Saturday against PSG, and it's a must-win game. I mean, we need to shake off the disappointment of our failed treble bid, where we need to walk away with at least one trophy, and this is the one that matters most. But also, it's just like, our team is so old, and we talked about the key contributors like Acerbi's being 35, 36. Some are over the age of 35. Like, we need to win one for these guys, because they're probably never going to have this chance again. So there's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of this needs to happen now. And well, we're all talking about how we never really expected to be here. Second final in 3 years, but just completely different paths. The easier path a couple years ago versus the gauntlet we face now. Also need to point out that we defeated the people's champion of Arsenal. So best team in Europe, if you ask Arteta. So no one expected us to be here, but it's kind of a similar thing for PSG, I'd say, because we were sitting here in December, and PSG, it was a few teams like PSG and Man City, and I want to say one more, were kind of just at the bottom of the league table. They were struggling to get their campaigns going. And then ever since January hit, this PSG side has just been on a roll. They've looked unstoppable at times. And I was potting with Sterling and Irfan right after the Bayern win, and we were talking about who would you rather play in the final, or who do you think it's going to be? And Jay was freaking out about it possibly being Arsenal, but the consensus was like, hey, PSG are the best team in Europe. PSG are the best team left in this competition. And from that respect, it's cool. Like we're seeing the two best teams from this Champions League campaign face off. You don't always get that. And hopefully we get the game we're looking for in terms of result, in terms of quality. I'd say, let me just think here. So a couple of things to point out with PSG. First off is just once again how impressive they've been in the knockout rounds. It was lackadaisical at first, but once they played Liverpool, they kind of announced to people that they were here. They dominated Liverpool. It wasn't really reflective of the score, but they were carving them open at will. They eventually beat Liverpool on penalties, and they've gone through the English gauntlet, knocked out all these English teams, and now they're in the final. There's a lot of similarities between PSG and Barcelona. They both play 4-3-3s. They're both extremely young. They're both these high pressing teams, and the good thing is we're battle tested. We're ready for this. We know what we're up against. We're used to playing these high pressing teams. This is the third high pressing team we faced in a row. We're used to playing teams with younger legs, and when you only have one match, fatigue becomes less of a problem. My biggest concern for this match is probably PSG's midfield, Vitinha, Ruiz, and Neves, who they dominated against Arsenal, and we saw how much our midfield struggled against Barcelona. So that's what I'm most concerned about. And then you can't talk about PSG without talking about Dembele and just a ridiculous season he's having. 30 goals in all competitions. This guy's, don't know if it's fair to call him a failed winger, but converted winger. He's the type of profile we've struggled against so many times. That quicker, agile, spry player who can get out, get behind you. We have a very slow defensive line. Acerbi's not quick. Acerbi has done fantastic work against the more traditional center forwards, but we have struggled against these pacier guys in the back. So that's something I'm worried about. But overall, I feel good going into this match, guys. I mean, we've done everything we need to in the Champions League campaign this year. We know what we're good at, which is set pieces. We're good on the counter, getting these goals through Dumfries, through DeMarco on the wings, and there's a clear path towards us winning this game. If you check the sports books, basically everyone's calling this thing a toss-up. Could go either way, a true 50-50. So while we've struggled with these pacey, intelligent strikers, while we might struggle with Hakimi at right wing back against DeMarco, we have large advantages. And I'm just hoping, Jay was talking about the forward play. Jay was talking about how Lautaro and Thuram haven't been in sync this season. Well, now's the time to sync up. They're both fully rested. They're both going to have multiple weeks off. PSG is not going to be familiar with playing against two strikers because so few teams in Europe do it. And this is the anointing moment for Lautaro. This is when we need to go and get the job done, and he needs to finish what will be the best Champions League campaign of his career. So, Mikko, break it down for me. What are we expecting to see against PSG?
Before I go into that, quick comment about the bookies. What I'm looking is that PSG is kind of a clear favorites according to the bookies. It's like in decimal format, it's 1.6 for PSG and 2.3 for Inter. So like it's not Barcelona Inter level, but it's pretty close. Like and I feel it shouldn't be maybe that far. Maybe it should be a bit closer, or like it's maybe a bit more even than what the bookies think it is. But that's the general consensus, at least. About the match, yeah, I think you said it well that set pieces will be huge for us. At least I discussed this that for the second leg against Barcelona that it's gonna be big for us, but we didn't score any goals from set pieces apart from the penalty. But yeah, I think that's a key. That's a key for us, as well as you pointed out, the wing backs and our wing play in general. I think it will be fairly similar as Barcelona matches, where that they will keep the ball. We will sit deep, and I wanna hope that we can play a bit better, like with the ball, than against Barcelona. We played pretty well against Barcelona in the second, like first half, and I would wanna see that kind of game from us. And I remember, was it one of the Arsenal games I watched? I think PSG was in a trouble at the start. Maybe it was the second leg then. I'm not quite sure. But it might be the second leg, first half, right from the start. They were like so messed up and in panic. But Arsenal couldn't score the goal. And then it kind of went away, the whole thing for them. But I would want to see us being able to play a bit more. And you made a great point about the midfield that I think Çalhanoğlu has been struggling this season, and especially in the past months a lot, and that might kind of play a part in our struggle to play in the midfield. And Barella, I don't know how kind of. I'm not saying he doesn't have the mentality or he is like complacent in any capacity, but I think he at times he's been struggling a bit too, and even though he's like an amazing player and has played very well for us, I think at times when the tempo goes up, I feel that our midfield is kind of struggling, and I would really want to hope that we can kind of find the kind of we would find the lanes how to play the ball so that they are not pressed that badly, which usually leads us to making mistakes with the ball, because those are the most dangerous situations for this team when we are kind of okay, now we go forward, now we attack, and then there's some sudden loss of control of the ball or some kind of interception, and then the opponent starts the quick counter attack, and then we are in trouble. I'm sure Inzaghi and the team knows this as well, and that's kind of the thing we need to avoid, since I have some kind of a hope that we should be able to contain PSG if we are defending deep and we are like fully focusing on that. But then again, when we compare to Barcelona, I think they have a lot of players who can shoot from afar, and they are like eager to shoot, and pretty good shots like Fabian Ruiz and Kvaratskhelia, Dembele. So it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see like how the game starts, how it evolves. Will it go like these Barcelona matches, or are we able to kind of sustain the pressure and then turn it around so that we can actually have a possession too and kind of do damage on their end as well.
Jay, if we are going to win this match, what needs to go right for us? Or will be the headline if we come away champions?
Good question. I don't know what a headline might be, but for me, and I've mentioned this before, that this comes down to a lack of choice for us. You know, we spoke about having bottled the Scudetto and just having a all-round underwhelming season, aside from this one bright spark being the Champions League. I'm not much for believing in esoteric things like destiny and fate and all this kind of stuff, but you know, we spoke about the heroism which was overcoming these Barcelona freaks and overcoming Bayern Munich, and now once again we're playing a team full of ridiculously skilled, talented, attacking superstars and superstars in the making. Desiree Doué, Dembele, Kvaratskhelia, and then Vitinha and João Neves. I'd never heard of João Neves before this year, but apparently he's the best midfielder in the world, according to all these fucking reels I keep seeing on Instagram. But it is what it is, right? You're going to come up against these kinds of teams in the Champions League, and for the struggle that we overcame against Barcelona, for the stories that were spoken about, a Cherby story and all this kind of stuff, it feels like we have no choice but to win it. These Desiree Doués, these motherfuckers, they'll have years and years and years to win it. I'm sure they'll all be in Ballon d'Or contention for the next 5-10 years to come, and I'm sure I'll tear my hair out having to endure the absolutely insufferable social media drivel or Doué versus fucking, I don't know, Doué versus Arda Güler or something like that. Desiree Doué versus Yamal. Are they going to start calling Yamal, Pomade if he starts scoring penalties? You know what I mean? Like, we've got a decade to look forward to this trash. For now, just let us have this one. It's a last chance for, like I said, these old school, last of a dying breed type heroes like Acerbi, Sommer, Damian, Mkhitaryan. Just let us have this one, and then you guys can have the next 5 for all I give a fuck. And when I look at it through that lens, again, which is a completely non-footballing lens, a completely non-tactical, non-tangible lens, the only option I'm left with is we have to win for that to be the case. So if we don't win, then like I said, it'll just be shit. It'll be like the fairy tale ending that we didn't get, and it'll just bug me fucking forever. So we have to win. I keep seeing these memes, I keep seeing highlighting just the nauseating glazing of people like Yamal and all this kind of shit. And then the caption is like, Inter saved football. We momentarily saved the world for having to hear about Yamal incessantly, considering the guy has scored like 9 goals this entire season or something like that. Ballon d'Or having scored 9 goals in the entire season seems a little bit fucking much, don't you think? But anyway, that aside, we have to do it once more and save the world from PSG. It was bad enough that we succumbed and were unable to prevent that disgusting oil club Man City from winning the Champions League a few years ago. Now there's another disgusting corrupt oil club in front of us, another state-sponsored, corrupt to the bone institution with unlimited funds and a lack of soul, trying to get their hands on their first piece of European silverware. And once again, it falls upon our shoulders to stop them. And so, like I said, for all these stories in our squad, for the old Warriors, let's just win this one, and then fuck, who cares what happens after that?
It's the only way. It's not. I don't care about saving football. I've seen the dumb videos people are posting online about Inzaghi reinventing the game and how Inter plays as a team where PSG plays as individuals. I don't care about any of that. It's just we have one shot left to walk away from this season with a trophy. This could be the biggest one, and if Inzaghi wins this match, he's immediately in the conversation for second best Inter manager of all time, possibly jumping Mourinho. Irfan, thoughts on the match?
Yeah, I'm quite torn. I don't really know what to expect in this match because it's been such a Jekyll and Hyde season for us, right? I mean, the Champions League performances have by and large been really good. I mean, everyone's heard that stat that Inter's only they've only been down for 16 minutes in the entire Champions League campaign. We've only lost that one match where we lost late to Atletico Madrid. But I can't also help but think that, we've exhibited some of the same issues that we've had in the league, in the Champions League as well, with these, conceding late goals and having other issues down the stretch with our defense. So it's hard for me to predict what exactly is going to happen. I think one thing that's going to be very important, though, is that we have to have the best player on the pitch. Like, if we don't have the best player on the pitch, I think we're going to struggle. And, there's so much star power on this PSG team. You look at Dembele, you've heard about, Donnarumma's saves that are incredible. Jay mentioned how João Neves is now, been catapulted into elite midfield status. And Hakimi, obviously, totally capable of giving us a ton of issues, including Kvaratskhelia as well. So, but to me, it really comes down to some of their, more, I think, underrated players. I don't think anyone in Serie A probably underrates this guy, but someone like Ruiz, I think, has just the ability to dictate this match and help dominate our midfield in a way that, could really cripple us. And so those are the sort of matchups that I'm looking at that really kind of concern me. And, we've talked a little bit about this as well, but like down the stretch, I mean, Dumfries has been incredible throughout the Champions League. But, someone like DeMarco just fallen off the face of the planet. It seems like he's just been so like non-existent for us. By and large, I mean, I know he had some key contributions in that Barcelona match, but he's someone that I think really needs to step up. Mkhitaryan, I think, is someone who needs to really step up. The midfield in general, Barella and Hakan need to really, really dig deep and find whatever it is that they have left to just, give it all. And obviously the forward line needs to step up. So there's so much going on. There's so many kind of storylines and plots that are being written in real time. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be fascinating to watch the match. I do think we have a very good chance. Like you were saying, Andrew, I feel relatively positive about it. But I do think there's a lot of narratives about PSG that people are talking about that are just not true. I mean, if you've seen them play, and I haven't seen them a ton, but I've seen them enough to realize that this is not a team of individuals. Like they play like a team. Like that team of the Neymar and the Mbappe, that team's long gone. I mean, this team is very cohesive. They play really well. They play almost unselfish in a lot of ways. Even Dembele, who, has been accused of being kind of single-minded in his career, they all play together really well. They also seem to like really enjoy playing, as a team. So I think that narrative needs to be squashed for PSG. I know a lot of these memes and people who don't know football that well seem to think that that's the case. That's not true. The other thing is that, I don't think, though, on the other hand, that their attack is nearly as good as Barcelona. I don't think it's in the same stratosphere, to be honest. That Barcelona team, the wave after wave of attack that they do is something completely different. Now, that's not to say PSG aren't dangerous going forward. Of course they are. They're really good, really skilled, really fast attacking players, but they're not on the level of Barcelona. And so I don't expect them to come out and consistently overrun us for large periods of the match like Barcelona were able to do. I just don't see that that's going to happen. But on the flip side of that, they're a lot more stingy, I think, defensively, even though that is, I think, their weakest point. They don't give up the ball and make stupid plays the way that Barcelona did down the stretch. And so our ability to kind of, get turnovers and press them to make mistakes and be out of position, that's going to be harder to come by. So those opportunistic goals for us are going to be rare, I think. So it's really going to come down to just playing organized, playing compact, and just taking and reading the game and reacting for us is going to be very important. But it's just, it's a fascinating sort of end to the Champions League and end to the season for us. And there's just so many conflicting kind of storylines and points that are all going to have to eventually, give one winner, in the next week. So I'm very excited about it. I'm very nervous about it. I think we still have a very good chance. But I'm really, really curious to see kind of how it plays out. Like I know you're going to ask us to do this, but it's really hard to predict how this one's going to go.
Before predicting anything, you mentioned that PSG is a lot better at defending the Barcelona. And yeah, I think that's true. They are like more accepting that they don't have the ball all the time. So yeah, it's probably a bit more difficult in that sense for us versus Barcelona. But I was looking at this second leg against Aston Villa, and PSG they won the first match 3-1. Then they scored 2 goals in the first half against Aston Villa, so it was aggregate 5-1. And then Villa managed to score 3 unanswered goals. So it was, and I didn't watch that match, but what I read that there was kind of a panic in the end in PSG that Villa could have kind of equalized the whole matchup there. So I think there are like I think we can hurt them if we just if we can kind of absorb their pressure and then kind of hurt them at the right times, or maybe even if we can get the flow going and put them in kind of panic mode. I think it's totally doable.
All right, Mikko, lock it in. Give me peer into your crystal ball for me. Give me a prediction.
Okay. Of course. We need to win this, as Jay said. That's kind of what needs to happen. So I'm gonna go with 2-1 win for us, and Lautaro will keep scoring. He scores the first goal. PSG will equalize by Kvaratskhelia, but then we will find the winner in the second half, and that's going to be Thuram. So for once in this season, we have both guys scoring in the same match to kind of have a good end to this season.
All right, Jay.
Like I was saying, there's nothing logical about any of this here. There's nothing tangible to really pin our hopes on. We're not coming from a triumphant league campaign with our heads held high and with momentum high and the team spirit, buzzing from a victorious Scudetto campaign. We're coming from the disappointment of arguably a bottling of the title, considering we held it in our hands at Lazio or against Lazio. And I can't remember whether it was Mikko or yourself saying earlier in the episode how Napoli held the title for much longer than us, and that's true. I think they had it for 21 games in first place, and we were ninth. We were leading the title race for 9 games, I think. So, yeah, they held it for more than double the time we did. But in the key moment, right at the end, we held it in our hands, only to cough it up straight away. So we're coming off the back of a really damaging Scudetto loss. Additionally, the condition of the players is just fucking all over the place. Like Lautaro, nowhere to be seen. Thuram, nowhere to be seen. Pavard, nowhere to be seen. Like, what the fuck's going on there? Is Bisek starting the final? Like, I honestly don't mind if he does, because I'm just really uncomfortable about the idea of Pavard starting at the Champions League final after 6 weeks out or something like that, as leaky as Bisek has been. Likewise, Lautaro and Thuram, they're not coming into this match particularly, tuned up. They're just cold and haven't played for a while. But then again, the last time Thuram started a game after a long absence, he scored a back heel within 30 seconds, So all this shit just points to this game having no basis, or rather our hopes in this game having no basis in anything really tangible. We're just hoping that we flip that magical switch, that magical Champions League switch, and just pull out another vintage Champions League performance. I think this is going to go the way that the Barcelona game went for the first 91 minutes. That is to say, I think we're going to go 2-0 up, and then PSG will score 3, and a final score PSG 3-2.
Irfan.
Because there is no God, and we just can't have nice things here.
Correct. Confirmed on multiple occasions.
I don't know, man. It's so hard for me to predict this. It's so hard for me to be particularly positive going into this, given the way we ended the league. Unfortunately, I'm going to play into like my fears. The way I've been thinking this play out in the most negative sort of way is, unfortunately, I feel like this match is going to go a lot like the match against Man City, in that we're really going to hold our own. We're going to impress a lot of the third parties watching. I think we're going to play sound defensively, I think we're going to miss a couple of key chances that we're going to have, and we're not going to have too many. And then I think it's going to come down to somebody scoring like an unlikely goal for PSG. Like, I think we're going to contain Dembele pretty well, the same way we contained Haaland. I think defensively and just from an organization standpoint, we're going to play really well, like we did against Man City. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to come out short by one goal. I think we're going to lose 1-0. I'm actually more inclined to think that we're going to end up drawing like 1-1, going to penalties. But going to penalties against Donnarumma is just a terrible, terrible indictment as well. So ultimately, unfortunately, I feel like we're going to lose this 1-0. And as cliche as it sounds, I'm going to give the goal to Fabian Ruiz, mainly because I feel like it's going to be someone from the midfield, kind of, again, very similar to Man City. I think it's going to be someone from the midfield, kind of parading in late and not being picked up by a tired midfielder or by a tired, wing back. And they're going to score some BS goal that's going to really harm us. It's going to be very similar. That's unfortunately how I see it playing out.
And who's going to be our Lukaku this time?
I swear, if Aslani, Arnautovic, Correa can't, but if Arnautovic, Taremi, or Aslani see the pitch, it's a massive failure on our part. None of those guys should be playing. I don't care what's happening. I don't care if Lautaro has one leg and his other leg is in crutches. He should not be coming off this pitch.
Maybe we'll give Arnautovic the Matrix, the 87th minute substitution to bid farewell to his Inter career. It's actually wild we got this far into breaking down the PSG match without mentioning Donnarumma. So good call, Irfan. The guy is one. If you get the penalties against Donnarumma, you're losing, and his shot stopping this season has been ridiculous. So anyway, you all know how my predictions have gone this season. Pretty much, I believe I predicted a 3-0 Barcelona win, resulted in a 3-3 draw. I predicted a 1-0 win over Roma. We lost 1-0. So I can comprehensively say PSG are going to defeat us 2-0. Who is the scoring goal? We'll give Dembele a goal and we'll give Hakimi a goal. All right, Jay's hot betting tips. I don't know if there's anything left to bet on besides the Champions League final. Do you want to look into your crystal ball and predict what's going to happen in the relegation race today?
Not particularly, but who's in that?
Yeah, there's actually a lot to play. There are like, what do we have there?
If you want to do something else, you can do something else. I'm not going to hold you to this. If you have a different thing you wanted to give your savant guidance on.
Yeah, Conference League final. Chelsea versus Betis. 6-3 to Chelsea. Anthony scores a hat-trick, but Chelsea and English teams are just far better than everyone else in the world, so Chelsea win, even this disgustingly shit Chelsea. So we'll have 7 or 8 English teams in the Champions League next season, because who the fuck knows how it works these days anyway.
Wait, but who's going to win that last Champions League spot in the EPL? It's quite a battle. You got Aston Villa, Chelsea, and Nottingham Forest, and Newcastle, basically all battling for 2 spots. It's going to be nuts. It'd be awesome if Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, I hope Chelsea don't make it. I mean, they've just been disgustingly shit all season. The team is full of flogs, and they were surviving off the back of Cole Palmer for a little bit and kind of crept up the table due to all these other guys just being horrendously shit, like, your Man United's, Tottenham's, etc. And next thing you know, they're in like a potential Champions League spot. So I really hope they don't make it. I don't care at all for, Newcastle or fucking Aston Villa or Nottingham Forest either, but better them than Chelsea. So yeah.
It's actually Nottingham Forest against Chelsea. That's a spicy one.
Yeah, and all the matches are at the same time. It's going to be it's a fun EPL day.
Like,
Yeah, that's
speaking of,
1
why
point
why
difference.
did the Serie do this bullshit where they had us and Napoli play first, and then they were so fucking dumb.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, you mean that why we played Friday?
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
if
yes,
we
to put
ended
all
up,
the attention on the Scudetto, decider, but still, just
it
do
was
that
because
dumb
of
shit.
it
it's
was
because if they needed a final. Like if Napoli would have lost and we would have drawn, they would have had to play on Tuesday or whatever.
it would have been on
Come on,
Monday.
just do that shit after the season. Seriously.
I know. Yeah. Well, let me, for once, I remembered to pull interesting content to share. This is a segment that we sometimes do, sometimes do not, mostly do not, where we share a funny tidbit read online about Inter. This one comes courtesy of an Aussie himself, I think. Don't quote me on that. Raul Duke, who says, Ferris probably has 40 messages in his inbox from Inzaghi telling him to sub on Mkhitaryan. That was yesterday when we were, or 2 days ago when we were up, I want to say 1-0 on Como.
I do like that. There's no chance he wouldn't have played if Inzaghi was on the bench. There's no chance.
Needed a few minutes in his legs to get ready for the Champions League final.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think this is episode 99, right, Mikko? Only
Yes.
yeah. So next week, episode 100, Champions League final recap. Keep those notifications turned on.
Oh man, a lot of pressure.
Tell your friends. Mikko, take us away.
Forza Inter, Forza Nottingham Forest.
Man, that's the worst way to sign off episode 99 before the Champions League final.
Yeah, I mean, we're about to play Champions League final, and you want the last words of this podcast to be Nottingham Forest?
All right.
It is what it is.
All right, well, I guess that's that. We'll catch you all next week.